Today we're going to be talking about nomenclature. So we're going to be talking about both type 1 and type 2 nomenclature, which both have to do with naming ionic compounds. Okay, so we're going to start out with type 1 nomenclature. Type 1 nomenclature has to do with ionic compounds that have to do with metals and nonmetals. Okay, the metals have to be group 1, 2, or 3. Okay, so your type 1 is characterized by a group 1, 2, or 3 metal bonded to a nonmetal. Okay, nomenclature, that's just a fancy chemistry word for naming. We're going to be naming compounds today. Okay, so the way that we do this is we're first going to write what the metal is, and then we're going to change the nonmetal's ending to IDE. So instead of writing barium fluorine, we're going to change the ending. So we're going to start out by writing our metal, which is barium, and then we're going to change our ending from fluorine to fluoride. Okay, so you can practice doing that. Oxygen, okay, goes from oxygen to oxide. Sulfur to sulfide. Okay, so you just change the ending of the nonmetal to IDE, ide. Alright, so we're going to start out with type 1 nomenclature. Those are going to be your group 1, group 2, and group 3 metals. So over here I have shaded out in blue, group 1, group 2, group 3, so you could really see a visual. If you have a metal that's in any of those groups, you're going to have type 1 nomenclature because you know what the charge is. Okay, here, group 1 is going to have a 1 plus charge, group 2, 2 plus, 3, 3 plus. Okay, you know what the charge is. Okay, for type 1, you know what the charge is so that you can use that. All right. So here's some practice. We've got MgO. So Mg, I found, is right here. And that's in group 2, so it's a 2 plus charge. So I'm going to start by writing its metal out, which is going to be magnesium. And then I'm going to have to write the nonmetal, changing the ending to IDE. So it'll be not oxygen, but oxide. Magnesium oxide. All right, and that's perfect. Next one we're going to do is SRF2. So you might have to look up what SR is on your periodic table, but SR is strontium. Okay, so I'm going to start by naming my metal, which is strontium. And then I'm going to name my nonmetal, changing the ending to IDE. So fluorine becomes fluoride. Okay, and then it's going to be my type 1 naming. Alright, so now we are going to start with our type 2 nomenclature. Okay, and this is ionic compounds that have to do with a transition metal and a nonmetal. Okay, so these are not group 1, 2, and 3 where you can predict the charge, but they're transition metals where you don't know what the charge is. So if you look at the periodic table, you can't tell what the charge is, and that becomes important in type 2 nomenclature. Okay, so what's going to be different is we're actually going to write a Roman numeral. We're going to write a Roman numeral after we name our metal. Okay, so your Roman numerals, 1, 2, 3. 4 is going to be I and then a V. 5 is going to be V. Okay. 6, 7. So your same thing is going to happen with your type 1. You're going to start with your metal, and you're always going to say your metal first. Okay, copper. And then what's different here is after the metal, you're going to write the charge of the metal ion. Okay, so inside the Roman numeral, inside the parentheses, is going to be a Roman numeral that has the charge of the metal ion. Once you write that, then you can finish out with your nonmetal. You don't have to write the charge of the nonmetal because when you look at the periodic table for ionic trend, the charge is always going to be based on its group. Okay, so group 7 is always going to have a 1 minus charge. Group 6 always will have a 2 minus charge. So you want to know your trend for ionic charge, and know that metals that are transition metals do not follow any trend. So that's why we have to say this charge describes, this Roman numeral describes the charge of this metal atom. All right, so let's do some practice. For type 2 nomenclature, we're talking about our transition metals. So our transition metals, which I've shaded in purple, use your Roman numeral to show the charge on the metal ion. You can't look at the periodic table and predict what that charge is going to be. Okay, there's no trend for it, there's no pattern to it. Some of them can have multiple charges, and we call these oxidation numbers. You can have multiple oxidation numbers. And that means that they can just be different charges. For example, copper can be copper 1, 1 plus, or copper 2, 2 plus. Okay, so it can have different oxidation numbers, different oxidation states. All right, so let's do an example over here. So we've got Fe2O3. If I look on my periodic table, Fe is right here. It's a transition metal, so that I know it's a type 2. Now what I need to do is I need to figure out what charge is it, okay? So if I look at this, I can figure this out two ways. I don't know what the charge is here, so I have to work backwards from my nonmetal. My nonmetal, oxygen, is a 2 minus charge. 1 minus here, 0 charge, 3 minus here. Okay, so oxygen is a 2 minus charge. There are 3 oxygens, so in total, the total negative charge is minus 6. Minus 2 times 3 of them. So I need all of my metal to end up balancing out that minus 6. There are 2 irons, so each iron is going to have a charge of 3 plus. Okay, so if I have 2 3 pluses, that'll be plus 6, and I have 3 2 minuses, that'll be minus 6. So plus 6 minus 6 balances out. Okay, so now I can write out what my nomenclature is. So I've got iron, Fe is iron, and then I know the charge of my metal now, which is 3 plus, so I put 1, 2, 3, in parentheses, Roman numerals. You can leave them like that, or you can make it into those Roman numerals like that. And then I'm going to follow out with my nonmetal, which is going to be oxygen, which will change to IDE, oxide. So it'll be iron 3 oxide. Okay. Next one, AgCl. So Ag over here is going to be silver, also a transition metal. So I need to figure out what the charge is. So how I'm going to do that, I'm going to look at my nonmetal. My nonmetal's charge is group 7, so it's a 1 minus. There's only one of them, so its overall charge is 1 minus. So Ag has to be 1 plus. Okay, so this is going to be silver. And then the Roman numeral is going to be 1. And then the last nonmetal is going to be not chlorine, but chloride. So I have silver 1 chloride. All right, so that's going to be my nomenclature for type 2, transition metals only. All right, so what we have for you right now is you can see I've got my type 1 and my type 2 nomenclature all graphed out onto one periodic table. So you can see if anything is in the pink outline, it's going to be type 1. That's groups 1, 2, and 3. You already know what the charge is. Type 2 is your transition metals. You don't know what the charge is, so you have to use those Roman numerals to tell you. All right, so I want you to try 4 or 5 of these out. So you got Al2S3, AuO, TiO2, and CaBr2. So I will give you a hint and tell you that Au is gold. Okay, Au is gold. All right, the other ones you should know already. The last activity that I want you to do is I just want you to write which of these are type 1 and which of these are type 2. I'm going to help you out with the first 2. I know that chromium chloride is going to be a type 2, because if I look for chromium, Cr, number 24, is going to be transition metal. I also am showing my charge of 4 plus is in my Roman numerals. My sodium fluoride doesn't have any Roman numerals, okay? And sodium is group 1, so I know that it's going to be a type 1 naming. All right, so I want you to try it for the next 4. Write out what the naming is, and then say whether it's going to be type 1 or type 2 naming.